Greetings, ne'er-do-wells, Mazaroth's court. It's Elgris today. And in this video, I'm going to talk about an interesting subject. I'm going to talk about the anime version, well, the manga, but mostly the anime version of I was reincarnated into a total fantasy knockout in another world. I might have flubbed that title a bit, but that's what I believe the title is. Basically about two office buddies. And one of them makes a wish to be irresistible, gets hurt by a goddess, transported, to another world. It's an isekai. And don't click off just because you heard it's an isekai, because this one actually is somewhat interesting and does pose old Selgris with a very fascinating and deep question when you look deeper into the source material and the meaning of the whole thing. So the two office workers, one that makes wish to be irresistible, he gets turned into like this blonde hair, blue eye, waifu, hottie, babe, whatever you want to call, an attractive young woman. And along with his friend, who's your typical glasses wearing, his boss. He's not like a little nerd type. Typical glasses wearing straight man, interestingly enough, who doesn't really laugh or enjoy himself, takes life seriously, especially an archetype you see in Japanese manga and anime, and they're transported to the other world. So not only is the protagonist turned into this bombshell, but also linked to his friend, and the friend is like his sword and shield. Like as long as they're like in sync or and also physically close to each other, the friend gets a power boost and becomes like this, warrior empowered by magic and the like. More like magic translates into a physical force. But what I find most interesting about this whole setup, the whole idea behind I reincarnated into a fantasy knockout in another world, is the whole aspect of how it relates to trans representation in media, especially trans women's representation in media. The two characters start to have a growing attraction, and they spend most of all season one, culminating at the end with the two of them having this parallel intermonologue where they're like, "Oh, I can't fall in love with this guy. I don't want to be gay, even though the character is now a fully biological functioning woman. I mean, the goddess and everyone else makes it clear that he could get, or she, I should say, now can get pregnant, and she's, and the plumbing's all right down there, and everything like it matches up with the presentation sex. So I do find it very interesting that they're like, oh, I don't want to be seen as gay. Like I can't fall in love with this guy. And it made me think about, as I said, the representation of trans people, especially trans women in media. The fact that even in this case, where it's done by allegory, that no matter how feminine presenting they are, there's still that stigma, if you want to call it that, in society. And we see this through the lens of media. If I'm in love with this person, is it gay? It's kind of like, there's also the whole thing of traps and Japanese culture, but this is different. This is like a trans person. And I find it interesting, as I say, not to be too repetitive with that word, that there's always that stigma there. No matter how feminine the trans woman is presenting, we see it in other forms of media too. There's always, well, that's really a dude. Like I see that a lot on like gamer boards, the gamer culture and comic book culture. There's like, and there's the fear for the other party, the partner, that if they have romantic feelings for this person, especially if they act on them, for the trans woman, then they'll be seen as gay. They'll be like less of a man by extension. Even if they're the dominant partner in the relationship, not to get too graphic, they'll still be seen as less of a man. They'll be seen as queer or gay or whatever pejorative term you want to pick for like a non-traditional form of sexuality, like an alternative lifestyle. And I was thinking, yeah, that is quite the dilemma, which I myself don't see it as a dilemma, especially in this case, because they're even fantasizing like on this parallel track at the end about like having kids together. So this is obviously, due to the magical nature of everything in this world, a straight relationship for, maybe with some extra steps, because the the protagonist started out as biological or prefer cis male, but they're still like worried that they're going to be gay even if they have kids. And I'm thinking that's a great reflection, a great allegory for how trans is represented across all media. I mean, from things as silly as the classic, pet detective movies there with Jim Carrey, right to like, more recent things and gaming culture, like I say, where even a misogynistic guy like Andrew Tate in The Manosphere said, I would have intercourse with like a trans woman who looked like Megan Fox as opposed to a biological woman would look like Hulk Hogan. And even his little misogynist followers, a lot of other commentators, then get down on him and say, "You can't do that. That would make you gay. Like, he's gay now." And all. And it's very interesting how that is still stigmatized, no matter how passable, to use a term from the community that trans people get, especially trans women. They're still seen as lesser, not only different, but lesser. And that stigma then extends to their partners that there must be, something wrong with them. Like they're obviously not straight if they like are attracted to this person. Even if you can't tell this person isn't their sex assigned at birth, like in a lot of cases, like the surgery and voice therapy and other cosmetic changes and, their lifestyle, it's very difficult to tell. It's almost, impossible. It's not impossible. And it's like, well, you should be able to tell, like that's placed upon the other partner, especially. Like you got fooled, and that makes everyone like question your sexuality. So I find, like I say, I find this allegory here is a lot deeper than people think. And I know Japanese culture is not like a one for one with North American culture, but it is very fascinating. Like how it's approached in here. So the character, it's played for laughs, but it is deeper when you think about it. That the two characters are afraid of that stigma, even though no one in this world knows, or very few people do. Maybe one other person, a hero, knows by the end of season one of the. Speaking of the anime, more so than the manga here, that the protagonist, was quote unquote a dude at one point. So there's no stigma in this world if they stay there, but they still don't want to give into it because they feel internally it will make them gay. Like there's a lot of internal homophobia and stuff going on. So I find this, like I say, a very apt mirror to our own world. And, it also feeds into that whole debate that I mentioned earlier about traps or traps gay. And this could be one to see as kind of an extension of the whole trapism thing, But these two are going in with their eyes wide open, but still they don't they're worried about like what this will mean for their sexuality, which I think is ridiculous. And I think it's like overplayed also in the real world. Like, the whole idea of you getting tricked. And unfortunately that will lead sometimes to violence, for the partner, quote unquote, that gets tricked, because then they'll feel like less of a man. And the only way they can regain their manhood is then by doing violence against the trans person, the trans woman. I think the whole thing is kind of silly, and I'll probably get some comments saying, "Well, you must be gay," or whoever, whatever you are, if you're human under there, you must be gay. And I'm thinking, now grow up. It's not that sexuality always isn't that simple. But yeah, I would recommend this as opposed to a lot of other isekai. It does actually have a hook. Now, am I saying that this is like Shakespeare, or this is on the level of some anime greats like slash manga greats like Genesis Evangelion, or which is a great representation of child soldiers in drama, or Cowboy Bebop. which talks about which deals with the endless cycle of revenge and the meaning of life, and things like modern debt slavery. No, corporate corruption. No, I'm not saying that, but I am saying it is thought provoking, in particular in our modern era. So if you want a good representation of the trans dilemma, for lack of a better term, for straight men in today's world, then give I was reincarnated as in another world as a fantasy knockout to try. Only one season has come out so far. I hope we get another season. Like I say, there is comedy and some typical isekai elements for those who are more into that. But yeah, give it a try. It's great representation, in my opinion, some of the deeper issues of transgenderism in our modern times. And it is great, also example representation. So from Azeroth's Court, this is Felgris signing off, near to Wells. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all my viewers and thank you for watching. And have a wonderful day from Azeroth's Court. Farewell, ye ne'er-do-wells.